Hey guys, Brad Burkhart here, Killer Bass Baits, Bass Pro Shops, Nitro Pro, and I'm going to give you a recap on my South Holston tournament. First, let's talk about conditions. It was post-spawn for the most part. The water temperature had really warmed up the week before we got there, and I think I talked to some guys and they said it was in the mid to high 60s. Well, when we got there, it was in the low 70s. And tournament morning, I think the water temperature exactly was about 70 or 71 right there at Observation Knob. And what I did was I found some post-spawn largemouth. Now I know that that's completely against the norm because smallmouth and South Holston are synonymous with each other, and we all agree with that. And the last 2 or 3 tournaments I've had up there, I've targeted smallmouth and I've fished for smallmouth and had some pretty decent bags. But I kind of stumbled upon something lucky on Thursday afternoon and got in a pretty good bite of largemouth in just isolated laydowns, okay? And the baits that I use, one was a spinnerbait and 2 was a floating worm. That's how I caught those fish for the most part on the tournament day. But I found them with the spinnerbait. And what I was doing was I was just kind of hugging the bank, paralleling the bank, and making parallel casts out the side of these trees and bringing it right down across the front of them. They were coming up out of it and getting them. Now, tournament day, it changed a little bit. I caught a couple on spinnerbait early. I actually lost a really good fish on spinnerbait Saturday morning that would have helped a lot, but they changed and they started, they were buried up in the trees a little bit more. I don't know if the high pressure got to them or what, but we flipped a couple up. But really what saved my tail at the tournament was a Cinco, a white Cinco rigged wacky style. And I know that that's kind of like in the news nowadays. All these pros and things are talking about wacky rigged worms, wacky rigged Cinco, wacky rigged this. Well, it really works because it is like the ultimate finesse fishing, okay? Especially when you're around wood and things like that. I mean, it's hard to beat them. But let me kind of run down and give you the conditions that we had on Saturday morning. Like I said, the water temperature was around 70, 71 when we started. It was pretty much a bluebird day. It was really hot, and you know, you still had some fish that were on the beds. I actually caught my last fish that I weighed in Saturday off the bed, but you had some fish that were still trying to spawn, but I would say the biggest majority of them were all post-spawn, at least the largemouth that I caught. And this is the first time I've ever went up there and targeted largemouth and actually caught them. Real quick, let me show you my baits that I was using, okay? Okay, first one, this is a 1/2 ounce Killer Bass Baits Killer Blade. It's a chartreuse and white. It's got a white Zoom single tail Fat Albert on it for a trailer. And really and truly, when it comes to spinner baits, if I'm throwing one, 9 out of 10 times, this is the one I'm going to grab. It's got a gold swing blade and a nickel main blade. It's a perfect search bait looking for those post-spawn largemouth, especially around trees. You know, you can let it flutter down in there. A lot of times they'll come up and get it. And around fry garters, you know, like I said, we had a spawn that had went on. There was a lot of fry out in the lake. And if you reel this thing by one of those males guarding the fry, he's going to bite it. So that's my search bait. That's how I found them, was with a 1/2 ounce chartreuse and white Killer Bass Baits Killer Blade. Now, the line was 17-pound test. I never go below 17-pound test throwing a spinnerbait. I know that may be heavy for some. Heck, it may be light for some. But I always use 17-pound test fluorocarbon. This is P-line fluorocarbon. I really like it. It doesn't have a lot of memory. It's really good line, low stretch, and it's very abrasion resistant. But 17-pound test fluorocarbon on my spinnerbait. This is a 6/8 Killer Bass Baits rod, as you can see. And then again, like in my video I shot from Cherokee, this is a Bass Pro Shops Pro Qualifier. 6:4 to 1 ratio. Remember, 6:4 to 1 is what I do just about everything in the world with, and that's what I was using up there to fish my spinnerbait with. Okay, now I told you I had a bait that saved my tail, and I really do, and I really did. This is what saved my tail. Like I said, I lost a couple of good ones that morning on a spinnerbait. I actually broke one off, and it about ruined me. But I broke one off, and I really can't explain why. But halfway through the day, I just picked this joker up and started skipping it around those isolated pieces of wood and cover and whatnot, and it really saved my tail. You can see, I hope you can, the hook in this thing. It's kind of like a circle hook, like a little octopus hook, and it's got a weed guard on it. Believe it or not, the hookup ratio is really pretty good. A lot of guys don't like them. I like them, and I'm going to tell you why. I can skip this thing back in the middle of the nastiest cover you want to fish, and I can get it out. And if you rig it in the middle whacking style, when you move it, your worm wiggles, okay? And that's what you want, because you throw that thing out there and you let it set, and you just twitch it, and it pulses. It just kind of gives it one of these deals, okay? It'll be flat, and then when you pull it, it'll bend and then back out. And that's what you want. That's what gets them. Now, you will notice that this thing's tied to braid. This, if I'm not mistaken, this is 17-pound test braid. I may have been using 10 at the tournament. I'm not sure. I probably just picked one up, really, whichever one had braid. But I don't tie a leader to it. I tie this joker straight to braid. It helps it float down a little bit slower, actually. I don't think the braid keeps them from biting it. At least it didn't the one Saturday, because they were all over this thing. Now, as far as what I throw it on, this is actually our Tightline series spinning rod, and this is actually the rod that I tightline with that most of you guys know me best by. This is a 6'9" medium light, and the reason I want that real limber rod, and you can see it's got a lot of flex to it. One, with all that flex, I can really skip that joker back under whatever I want to. And two, remember, braid has zero stretch, okay? So all of that flex in that rod is negated by that stretch. So you're not going to worry about not getting a good hook set. You'll get one, okay? That really saved my tail. And all that is a white Senko. And I'm not sure about the size on the hook. Gamakatsu makes it. I really can't remember. But hey, if it's big enough to stick out of that worm and you got a big enough bite to it, go with it. It'll work. But get the one with the little weed guard on it. I'm telling you, it'll save you a lot of trouble. Possibly a lot of cussing. Anyway, now, I told you my last fish I caught up there, I caught on the bed. And I don't know if a lot of you guys are familiar with bed fishing, get to do it a lot. Where we live, we don't do it a whole lot. We don't have really the opportunity. But this is the bait that I used to catch the last one that I weighed in, one of the better ones. It was a 3-pounder off the bed. And all this is a Bass Pro Shops white flipping tube. It may even be called a tender tube. I can't really remember. It's got a mustad grip pin flipping hook in it, straight shank. As you can see, anytime I flip plastics, I use a straight shank hook. The little grip pin on the back goes right up against the back of the bait and holds it real good and tight on the hook. And then you just poke that joker all the way through, skin hook it on the back, and you're ready to roll. This is a 3/8 ounce sinker. This is actually the rig that I caught it on. And the reason I want a 3/8, sometimes I even go heavier, is if I can flip to the bed and get it on the bass and aggravate her, hit her with it, I'll do that. A lot of the stuff you read in those books about don't flip your line over a bass, don't hit the bass with your bait, that's garbage. Because you can literally pester the fire out of them by hitting them with the bait over and over and over, and they'll eventually eat it. Now, we all know they got to be hooked in the mouth, not outside. But you can really drive them nuts by just beating them and slapping them in the face with the bait itself. So that's why I use a little bit heavier one, and I always put a bobber stop on top. As far as my line goes on this, it's a 20-pound test P-line fluorocarbon. Or this may be Bass Pro Shops fluorocarbon, I can't remember. It's one or the other, but nevertheless, it's 20-pound test fluorocarbon. A lot of guys flip with 25. I really and truly think that I get more bites with 20 instead of 25. Now, I know it may make you a little nervous sometimes if you flip in, you know, some really nasty looking stuff, but if you take your time, you can get them out. As far as my reel that I was using, this is a Abu Garcia Revo. It's STX, and I've only got a couple of Revos, and really the only thing I use them for is to flip with. This is an 8-to-1 gear ratio, so when I flip it over there, if I'm done, 2 cranks, it's back instead of 3 or 4. Or if I flip it in a bush and I get a bite and it comes to me, 1 crank and I'm caught up with it and I can set the hook. The rod I was using, this is one of our new rods. This is a Bass Pro Shops, this is a Killer Bass Baits Trident series rod. This is one of our new rods. This is a 7/6 heavy flipping rod. And I really like this new blank, guys. It is awesome. It's ultra light. It's extremely light, it's very sensitive, and it's very economical. These things only retail on our site for $109, okay? And we've got them in a couple of stores too. So this is something you really need to be looking for, is the rod itself. But as far as the last fish I caught in my tournament, I caught her off the bed on the old white tube, okay? Now, just to kind of recap what I did, I went to South Holston with visions of giant smallmouth in my mind. It didn't work out. Now, we caught them, granted, but it wasn't the 4s and 5s that I had caught up there in years gone by. It seemed like that they were starting to leave the worm bite, you know, that everybody knows about now. They were starting to leave it. So I actually just kind of stumbled up on some largemouth, was able to put a plan together, and I stuck with them. I literally stayed, this is important, I literally stayed in one creek in about a 75 or 100 yard radius all day. Hey, my daddy told me a long time ago, why leave them to find them? And I stuck to my guns and I stayed put, and it probably took me till noon to catch 5, but I stayed in there. I ended up in 22nd place with 11-13 just by hanging out. Now, I hope this helps. You can use those patterns about anywhere during the post spawn. Good fishing, and God bless. I believe the train's coming. Catch you guys later. See ya.